Hey, Mitch Gray, thank you for joining me again. Of course, this is Dr. Keith McNally, and this is the Question Guy podcast. And we are reviewing How to Hire and Keep Great People. A great book that
Available anywhere you can order books.
absolutely, it is a great book. And I've been reading it. This is probably my fourth time through, and we are reviewing each chapter, chapter by chapter. And so I love what you're doing here, explaining how just what it says, how to look for, how to make that part of your daily, weekly, monthly practice, because you never want to go without, building a team. Like last time we talked in chapter 9, I asked you about team building, and it's reference either, in a business situation or in a sports situation, because you make that analogy quite simply. And I was just wondering if, how does that really work? Because we're looking at, when I think of sports and we think about the positions that need to be filled, easily we go to football, easily we go to basketball, easily we go to baseball, specific positions, specific skill sets, specific players, and they need to be damn good at what they're doing. And hopefully if they're baseball, hopefully they can hit the ball too. That's even a bonus. And I'm thinking, well, that doesn't really apply, because if you don't have somebody who can pitch, just being a good-natured guy isn't really going to get you very far. So I don't know. I'm not in your situation. I'm not the professional here, but you make it sound as if you're always looking. It's part of your nature. It's part of your character. It's part of just what you do. And I know it's part of who you are, because we've had conversation. It's even in your book that if you're going to a restaurant, if you're going to Starbucks, if you're going to wherever, it's just having a conversation. Hey, you're looking for an opportunity? No. Do you know somebody who is? It's that simple. Or, and again, I think it was a couple of chapters back. If she serves you dessert,
Yes,
she's the person to hire.
yeah.
Well, chapter 10 is a little bit, so we're going to go a little bit deeper. So chapter 10 reads this: we aren't worried. How you fire people matters. Okay. And so this is a little bit of a twist, but really totally important. And so you kept this chapter straight and to the point, and you kept your questions at the end straight and to the point. So I think, like we did last time, I want to read them all out, and then we're going to, we'll tell a story. It'll be story time, but we'll just see where you go with this. So question number 1, have you ever been fired from a job? So this is going to be intriguing. How did you feel, and how did it impact your family? This is interesting. Question number 2, what considerations do you take before firing someone? What considerations should you take based on the culture that you've designed? Question number 3, what systems are in play to ensure each team member has every opportunity for success? You can take this wherever you want. If you don't want to touch question 1, you don't, if you don't want to talk, you've been fired. You've actually we've had that conversation. We've had that conversation on the podcast. From a really weird situation. You've been fired as a preacher. How do you get fired as a preacher? I don't even see that.
You do stuff that church people don't like. Doesn't have to be bad stuff.
Well, that's just weird. I'm sorry. You get fired as a preacher. So,
yeah.
And nobody likes to own up to that. Have you ever been fired? No, of course not.
Right.
Nobody likes to be owned up, because it's like a mark against you, and yeah.
Whether it's your fault or not, right?
Yeah.
It's assumed that you did something negative to be fired.
Yeah.
And so,
I'll even answer the question. Does it feel good? No, of course not.
No. And really, when we talk about, I had a client a few weeks ago. We were talking about making some changes on their team, and the statement was made, well, I don't have a problem firing people. And I rebutted with, you should.
Wow.
And the client kind of looked at me like, oh, geez, where's this going to go?
The typical Mitch answer, right? You should.
Right. Yeah, you should. You should. Because really, and I've experienced other people and bosses, but we don't have a problem firing people. Okay. Do you not realize that when you make that statement, it is telling us more about you than it
And
is
your
anything
culture.
else?
Yeah.
Yes.
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 And so if there was an underlying point of this chapter, it would be the idea of how do you lead with empathy and compassion?
Mm.
And the reason I ask the question, have you ever been fired? I actually have this crazy belief. I'm the guy that says, don't worry about qualifications, and I'm about to give you a qualifier. I actually feel like there should be an unwritten rule that before you can own, lead, or operate a business, you have to have experienced going through being fired.
Really?
And the reason I say that is there is only one way to gain experience, and that is through experience. And I believe that when you go through a moment that you are let go of a job.
Now you're talking about
And
fired and not being downsized. It's purely being fired. Or does it
well,
matter?
either one doesn't matter. I mean, downsizing the company is firing people. It is. I mean, you're
Well,
no longer employing them, regardless. The only reason we use the word downsizing rather than firing is because of the motivator.
okay.
That's the only difference. There is just like during the pandemic. Well, we have to let people go. Okay, let's just call it what it is. You don't have the revenue you once did, so you're firing people. That's all it is.
Okay. Well,
And
because it's easy to feel okay about being let go because of that. I mean, it doesn't feel good to lose a job. Straight up.
depending on the setup and communication,
Okay.
I have seen scenarios. I've seen scenarios where someone walks in one day to a job and downsizing has suddenly happened. There
Right.
are moments that does happen.
Right.
There are also moments, as I read a few days ago, where the company Bed Bath and Beyond,
Yeah, that's a big story now.
unfortunately, lost their CFO in a tragic way. So our heart goes out to them, even though we don't know them,
Right.
and their loved ones. They've made the decision they're gonna close 150 stores. They're having to shrink about
So like
30% of
13.
their
Yeah.
operations.
Yeah.
So let's call it what it is. Are those people technically being fired? In most definitions, no. Are those people being fired? Yes. They're not being replaced or relocated. So
Or
then
losing their job. Yeah.
let's just tell the truth, how the truth is told.
Mhm.
They are being fired. And I just firmly believe that until someone goes through that, however we're going to package it, until someone faces the moment that if they have a family, they have to go to their family and say, we're not going to have any income for the next 2 or 3 months. They have to go to their family and say, okay, son or daughter, no, you can't play football this year because we can't afford it. I'm sorry.
Right.
Or they don't want to have to go to their family and say those things because that is an issue of positive type pride. It hurts.
Mm-hmm.
So I relegate myself to going and frying burritos at a night job at a gas station because it's my only option right now. My salary gets cut in less than half. Or for those of us that are predisposed to mental health issues, it becomes truly a crisis of life or death, because for someone with a propensity toward mental health, emotional health issues, the world has just burned. Mm-hmm. And so to my client the other day, and anyone else listening to this that said, I don't have a problem firing people, what that tells me is they lack a threshold of empathy and compassion. What that also tells me is they've probably never gone without. They've probably never had to work 2 or 3 jobs to provide for their family, as many of us have had to do in life. They've probably been privileged enough that they've never had to stress or worry when it comes to financial means. And I don't say that in a negative way. Good for you. I'm glad you've never had to experience that. What you can't allow that disconnect to do is have you say something like, I don't have a problem firing someone, because that's why I ask the questions at the end of this chapter. And I share my story in that chapter to help people understand when you have to fire someone, you were actually bringing chaos to their world. Now, someone can justify it all day long. Well, they didn't perform the way they should have. Thus, the follow-up questions. Did you give everyone on your team every opportunity within your ability to be a part of a thriving culture, to have the opportunity for success, and to build opportunity for themselves? Did you exhaust every single possible opportunity before you made the decision to let them go? When you did make the decision to let them go, were they clear on the disciplinary process that your company has set up? By the way, a disciplinary process is something that many, many organizations have in theory and on paper, but not in functionality. Listen to the last episode where I talked about my daughter and her scenario, where a girl, first day on the job, got fired, and you just start going
That was
through
just
that. It's like,
weird.
well, that's a whole other deal we could dive into later. There are some legalities there. Yeah, there are some legalities in labor law that you can't actually hire someone and fire them before they start working. Like, you just can't do that. That's actually against labor law policy and regulations.
They have to
So
show up.
there's all kinds of other stuff there. But you also, when it comes to unemployment and labor law, you also have to have a disciplinary program. You have to have paper trail. You have to have follow-up documentation that an employee signs off on every single time. In my scenario, that wasn't the case. Now, I know I was living in a different world at the time in church work, but I never got written up. I never had a paper trail. In fact, 3 days before that, because I was dealing with some personal issues and high burnout, I had gone to my leadership and said, hey, I just need, a sabbatical, whether it's paid time off or not. I just need a month. And 3 days later, they give me the approval, say, yes, we'll give you a paid 30-day sabbatical. 3 days later, they come back and renege on the sabbatical. And not only that, but then let me go from my job. Do immediately, not with a 30, do immediately. And so that's kind of the point to all of this chapter is, how are you leading, first of all, with empathy and compassion? How are you leading from building a culture that exhausts every opportunity possible for your people to succeed? By the way, that begins with the type of people you recruit, the people you hire, and your developmental programs. It's not always going to work out. And people understand that. And those aren't the scenarios I'm talking about. If you've exhausted every opportunity, if you have built a culture that sets a certain standard, and if you had made sure that you've given every single moment of success to every single person on your team, I'm going to tell you what happens 99% of the time. The people that aren't meeting those standards end up firing themselves. They end up coming to you and saying it's not working out. They end up coming to you and turning in their 2 weeks. And that's where you want to arrive as an organization, is that our culture is so high, our team is so strong, that if we hire someone and it wasn't the right fit, they end up firing themselves. And I take it even further, and I've shared this with many, many, many people in life, and I still get pushback on it. I don't care. I'm going to continue sharing it because I think it's the most humane thing to do. Outside of legalities, if someone steals from you, they have fired themselves. If someone has sexual abuse or anything of that nature, they have fired themselves. If someone commits some other type of criminal or disingenuous behavior that puts your culture at risk, they have fired themselves. So let's exclude those scenarios. Let's say you've hired a great person, it just isn't working out. You've gone through the disciplinary programs, you've exhausted every path to success, and it's just not going to work. I firmly believe, without any questions asked, that you should be such a great leader that you pick up the phone and you call someone who you know might have an opportunity for that person. And you help them.
What?
You help them
You're
move
having them find
on.
a job?
100%. 100%.
Wow. That's
They're not
that's
they're not a bad person. They haven't done anything illegal. It just simply wasn't a match. You help them
as
find a job.
long as, if and only if, that's my college statement, if and only if you set everything up for success first. Yes?
Yes.
No?
And they didn't fail. It's just not working.
Right.
Let me give you two examples real quick. A couple of years ago, I was working with a client. They were in the retail industry, helping them rebuild their team, get business back on track, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, multi-location.
Okay.
I was actually helping them do some hiring. And so
And this is as
before
a
I,
consultant.
yes,
Okay.
before I started with them, sometimes I find myself in these scenarios as a consultant where I have to do things to teach things, if that makes sense. So last
Well, I
month I
just
was
asked
out
because you weren't the manager, you were the consultant.
correct. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yep, correct. Teaching management.
Okay.
And so before I had started, they had hired a few people. Again, most of them people I would have never hired, but we work with what we
All
have.
right.
One person in particular who we poured into training wise, we poured into them, gave them every opportunity, exhausted every opportunity possibly. A great kid, young person, honestly, just trying to find their way in life, had some personal issues, et cetera, et cetera. So finally, it came time. Owner says we got to fire them right away. I said, okay, that doesn't really go with the culture we're building. So what if we try it my way? Cool. Okay, fine. We'll try it your way. So I sit down with said employee and I said, hey, so forget about work for a second. Forget about your performance. Tell me what's going on in life. And this young person, I mean, almost started crying, like, because there was just so much emotionally happening in their life. I think like their mom had passed and just some things that happened. And I said, first of all, thank you for sharing all of that. Second of all, I'm glad I could provide a safe space for you to share. Third of all, how are you feeling about work? Like, how does this fit in with your life right now? This person looks at me and Keith, I kid you not, word for word says, I hate it. I hate sales.
Oh.
I hate this industry. I've not enjoyed it from day one. I just needed a job,
Oh.
but I hate it. And I said, I get it. And guess what? Your performance reflects that. And that's okay. Thank you for being honest. That's okay. Can I do you a favor? And this kid looks at me and says, yes. And I said, I have a really, really good friend who used to work for me, who is a general manager of a fast food franchise, multiple franchises, always looking for great people. Do you mind if I refer you to this friend of mine? I'm sure they could get you on right away. And I mean, the kid's energy just went from life sucks and I hate it to, oh my gosh, someone believes in me. Now, think about the scenario. We're technically firing this person. But
Technically.
because of the empathy and compassion, this person all of a sudden goes, oh my gosh, Mitch believes in me. I mean, their physical demeanor changed drastically. I said, okay, give me 5 minutes. I walk away, take out my phone, call my buddy. Hey man, I got a kid, not working out, not a fit, doesn't enjoy this type of work. I think they'd be great for you. Yep, send them over. 30 minutes later, the dude has a job, not only a job, but a management position.
Dude.
A management position. So what I'm telling you is just because it doesn't fit with your culture and company doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means it may not be a fit. And so in that scenario, every single time, I'm going to make sure I know enough people to make a phone call. Every single time. I've probably done that for about 300 people. Not kidding. Over the 20, 25 years of my
Knowing you, I believe it.
So funny thing is, fast forward to actually just a couple months ago. So that was about 3 years ago. A couple of months ago, I get a phone call. Who's this? They leave me a voicemail. Hey, Mitch Gray, this is so-and-so with such and such police department. And we're calling for a referral for, and it was that they were needing a referral for that person because that person was trying to get into the police force.
That same kid.
Same kid,
Really?
but me as a referral 3 years later.
Wow. Pretty cool.
Another story real quick.
I like that story though.
That same type of story. Back in
Well, amazing.
probably
Did he get on on the force?
Yeah, yes, a police person to this day. To this day.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, only
To
been
this day.
3. Yeah, cool.
Yep. To this day.
Has he ever arrested you?
No.
Okay.
But I thought if I ever get caught, if I was I'm not in the same city, but if I was speeding, I hope
Just a
it's him.
ticket.
Uh, back up to probably the year 2000 would be my guess.
Okay.
I hired a kid out of desperation. Nice kid.
Wait,
Shop with me.
what were you doing in
So I
2000?
was running a high fashion retail store
Okay,
in the
okay,
year
okay,
2000.
okay.
So I was just trying to find people. I was kind of in my mode of learning how to build a team.
Right.
And
So this is young. This is your younger, very younger you.
I took over that store in December of '98. So this is just a year in.
Okay.
We were growing rapidly, having success, but I was trying to learn. I was in my early 20s at the time.
Yeah.
So I hired this kid. Him and his family shopped with me quite a bit. He was headed to a nearby college. I love hiring college kids, still do to this day. I think they're just amazing. Nice kid, kind of quiet and introverted, which I kind of needed. I had some really gregarious personalities on my team at the time. So I kind of needed that person that could deal with the grandma without being blown away, kind of quiet and, could still do a good job, but wasn't going to be gregarious and over personal. I needed
Your
that
balance on your team.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so I hired this kid, and hard worker, great kid, but so funny. About 3 weeks in, I was like, man, this probably isn't going to work, right? So then I just start my strategy of, okay, how can I exit this as quickly as possible, as empathetic as possible? So I walk up to him one day, and he's actually folding jeans at the moment. So I grab a pair of jeans and I start folding jeans with him. And I'm like, hey, man, so how you feeling about everything? And he goes, oh, Mitch, I don't know, man.
You're the
I
boss,
don't know.
and you hired him.
Oh, yeah.
And you hired him directly. Like you hired.
Oh, I hired everybody directly.
Okay.
Yes, 100%. Yep.
So you're now having this conversation with somebody you hired 3 weeks in, and you got big question marks.
And my question was, how are you feeling? How are you feeling about it?
Well, I mean, you got questions about his performance and such.
So totally, because and not that he didn't have work ethic, he just wasn't selling anything, and you can see it. Like he just didn't want to sell, right? And so I made a bad hire. I mean, you do that.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I put him in an unfair situation, quite frankly. And so I was like, hey, how you? He's like, Mitch, I don't know, man. I can't sell, man. Like I get nervous and my palms get sweaty. And I was like, okay, so we have 2 questions. Number one, do you think you can grow into it? I can help you. Or do you think this isn't for you? And he goes, oh, man, I think I can grow into it. And I go, okay, be honest with me. Do you think you can grow into it? Or do you think this isn't for you? You're not going to hurt my feelings.
Right.
And he said, Mitch, I don't think I can do it. I appreciate you. I said, cool. Can you give me 2 weeks? I'm going to make some phone calls. I could really use you for another couple of weeks. Don't worry about selling. I think it was like during back to school time. I was like, I can just use you coming in and cleaning up messes. I'm good with that. We can put you in the back to do freight for a few weeks. I'm good with that. Just give me a few weeks. He's like, yeah, cool. So a few days later, I talked to another friend of mine. Hey, I've got this kid, incredible hard worker, great family, dependable, really good personality, kind of subdued and introverted, but a really good, easy to talk to, manual labor guy. And the person I'd called owned a welding business. And so I said, hey, do you have some opportunity? He's like, yeah, I think I do actually. We could use somebody. He's like, does he have his welding certification? I was like, no, but he'd probably want to. Oh yeah, no problem. We can take care of that. Cool. Got him a job, man. 15 years later,
Okay.
I run into this guy. 15, not kidding. 15 years later, I run into this guy. Got his wife, 2 kids. I look up and I'm like, man. He looks at me and he goes, Mitch, comes and gives me a big old hug. And here's what he tells me. I'm not kidding. He said, hey, you remember that time you fired me?
No, I don't remember that at all.
I said, yeah, I do, man. And he goes, thank you. He said, you got me that job And that led me to figure out that I love construction.
Wow.
And I now own my own construction
Oh my
company. And
God.
he said, you know that neighborhood out north of town? I said, yeah. He goes, we're doing all of that. We're building all those houses. And I said, you mean to tell me, I knew what construction company that was. I said, you mean to tell me such and such
That's
construction
yours?
company is your? He said, yep. And he said, if you wouldn't have fired me and got me that other job, I may have never built my dream job. I love it.
Oh my God.
So the point to all of that storytelling is you are never wrong leading from empathy and compassion. In fact, you are always right. And if you're a leader and you have the attitude, I don't have a problem firing people, I'm going to encourage you to take a moment and go look in the mirror and spend some time with yourself and sit in the feeling of what it would be like for you to suddenly lose all of your income, all of your work, and all of your pride.
Yeah.
Sit with that for a second. And my gut feeling tells me if you can attach yourself at all to that feeling, you will do everything in your power from this day forward to never fire someone again. You may help them build a bridge to another opportunity, but you won't fire them in a way that causes them harm. I know my approach is different. Again, I've shared this approach and I have hundreds of stories of that happening. But I will never stop telling those stories, because the more that leaders can lead from empathy and compassion, and if they could ever experience something 15 years later where a kid comes to them and says, my family is stable. I mean, that dude's probably a millionaire by now, to be honest. I know a lot of the construction contracts he had. It's incredible. And if you can ever have the moment where a kid comes up to you, an adult now, and gives you a big old hug and says, thank you for building that bridge for me. If you can ever experience that, you won't want to fire people again. You will only be what I call an opportunistic bridge builder. It's not going to work with us, but I will find somewhere that it will potentially work. And that will pay dividends well beyond how I felt in 2004, 5,
Yeah.
when I was completely fired, no income, didn't know what was happening, food on the table for 4 kids at the time. We had our 3 kids plus a niece living with us. You never lose those feelings. You just don't. And I was already motivated before that experience to what I call fire people the right way. I was even more motivated afterwards, and it just works. It just works. It does.
Well, Mitch Gray, that is a fantastic story. And that's the best way to end this
Yeah.
episode of the Question Guy podcast. And so once again, thank you so much for your time. And that was probably one of the best stories I've ever heard. And I
Love it.
tell pretty good stories. And I've listened to many stories. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
And hopefully when we do this again, you'll have even more stories to tell us. So once again, thank you so much for joining us on the Question Guy podcast, and we'll see you next time. Take care.